Now we are going to touch on redefining art departments with sustainable practices. So we'll discuss tackling art department materials, reusing and embracing circular design. So please welcome Marian Wihak, production designer, multidisciplinary artist, DGC National Art Department. Joe Madziak, construction coordinator, IATSE 873. Lily Lee, climate change and circular economist, research analyst, Circular Partners, Viking Recycling. Peter Bajaj, president, Dufferin Gate Studios. And our lovely moderator will be Mara Siem Abdu, National Outreach Manager, Directors Guild of Canada.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I just want to thank Melanie and her team for all the great work that they're doing and for welcoming us a second time at SPF. It's an immense pleasure to be part of this work and to partner with them and take part in this great dialogue and these great initiatives. The DGC National Sustainability and Climate Action Committee, as part of its initiatives and its projects, works actively to create tools in film and television when it comes to supporting film and television professionals in their sustainability endeavors. In 2023, we launched the Power Budgeting Tool, which is a calculator that helps production managers understand and quantify the impact of generator usage on set. Our most recent tool, and the one that we will be presenting today, is the Carbon Emissions Calculator, a project led and supported by our department rep, Marian Wihak, and kindly put together thanks to the DGC Communications Department and Viking Recycling. Viking Recycling is the company that generated the numbers that we call the carbon emissions factors that were used by the developer in order to develop this tool. The numbers provided helped create the formulas on the back end on this calculator. And as I will show you in the coming minutes, the users can select materials that are being used on their sets, specify the quantity or the weight, and the calculator will tally the resulting carbon emissions for them. This can help them better understand the materials that they're selecting, that they source, and it helps them also determine which ones are the safest, which ones are the most practical, and which ones are the most reliable. We reached out to Viking Recycling in 2023 to discuss this project, and I will let Lily Lay, Viking's climate change and circular economy research analyst, explain their work and their process.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lily Lay. I'm a climate change and circular economy research analyst from Viking Recycling Circular Partners. I'm so happy and honored to be here today to present you a project that I've had the privilege of working on with DGC. This tool was designed to help stakeholders make more informed, data-driven decisions when it comes to choosing which material to be used on film sets, with the focus on minimizing the carbon footprint of the film industry. So let's just dive right into it. The calculator covers a total of 33 construction materials and items, which are made from various components such as polyethylene, polypropylene, polyvinyl chloride, and so on. Also, wood and metal are also prominent materials as well. And then the emissions calculated for these materials cover all the product stages from raw material extraction to the transportation to manufacturing site, and then the actual production process itself. This approach referred to as the cradle to gate boundary, as you can see on the right there. It is one of the key aspects of the life cycle analysis when it comes to analyzing any impacts of a product or service. So the actual process of calculating the emissions of each material covers a series of crucial steps. The first step is to define which unit we want to calculate the carbon footprint in. And As the unit is finalized, next slide, please. Sorry. As we decide on the actual units, the sources and databases are vetted based on first the relevance of the resources that we find. Next is making sure that the data is still valid. For instance, we are looking at the publication dates, and then adherence to industry standards, including the ISO, which is the International Organization for Standardization. We also verify the granularity of the data. Additionally, geographic location of the actual production is also important when it comes to calculating the actual emissions, so that's why this was factored in as well. Sometimes what we find doesn't have the same unit as what we desire. So that's why, for example, if we want square feet, but then if we have square feet, but then we want square meters, some unit conversions is performed as well to achieve the desired unit. So then finally, with the data being in the correct unit, the total, the number is then multiplied with the total dimensions and or like the total weight of the materials provided by DGC. So the final results then will represent the total embodied carbon emissions per unit of material. Some of the primary and main sources that we relied on during the process include the Environmental Product Declaration, EPDs, as well as the Life Cycle Analysis, LCA results from various manufacturers. The next example we use is the online database and tools, including the Embodied Carbon Construction Calculator, EC3. So for those who are interested in learning more about these resources, feel free to scan them, scan the QR codes on your phone. So then this calculator is an evolving tool, and you know, when I worked with DGC on this calculator, I really hope that this will help the decision makers become more sustainable and make informed decisions based on this data. And I really hope that this tool will play a crucial role in shifting towards a more environmentally responsible approach within the film industry. So thanks to Marian and Marwa for the opportunity to work on this project. And if you are interested in what we do in our services, feel free to browse our website, and then this is my email address. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lily. I'm going to do a quick demonstration of the calculator, and if you'd like to try it out for yourselves, you can visit dgc.ca, and you'll find both tools that we've developed. This one is called the Carbon Emissions Calculator, so I'll just do a quick, thank you, Tina, of how you can use it. It's quite simple. If you look at the green line that runs across, that's the total emissions resulting. So this line is actually anchored onto the screen, so as you scroll down to select your materials, you'll constantly keep seeing the carbon emissions results. So for example, you've got the categories broken down. Let's select, plastic, 44 millimeter thickness, and this is obviously in square meters, so let's select 2, for example. And steel fasteners and metal, that's an option, or we can pick anything else. As you'll notice, in every category, there is a list of materials that can be used on a set. If ever there's an item that you feel doesn't exist on our list, always feel free to get in touch, and we'll be able to include it and add it to the back end as well. So as you can see, you insert your item, you can add more items per category, and then you include the weight, square footage, or the square meters, and that will tally the number of total emissions resulting at the top. So you'll get the exact number, and you'll have an exact idea of what carbon emissions are resulting from certain usages. This helps you build the case. It helps you understand what the impact of materials selected is, and it helps you also understand what materials are worth sourcing and which ones you can perhaps not use or have alternatives to. So we find that it's practical. It helps you quantify the impact of what you use on your sets, and helps you understand also what you can be using as an alternative, what's the healthier alternative, or what's better not used altogether. So feel free to visit our website, dgc.ca, give it, try it out, give it a try and see how you feel about it. If you have any questions, I'm available, so feel free to get in touch. And I'm happy to receive any feedback or any comments. And the purpose is to also evolve this tool as much as we can so it becomes a lot more comprehensive and it becomes a lot more user-friendly as well. Should we move along? Can we have a conversation? Thank you.
Are these on? Are these on?
Yeah, they are. Okay, so we're going to start our panel now. I'm going to introduce our panelists. So Marian Wihak is a production designer, multidisciplinary artist, and the DGC National Art Department rep. Joe Matsiak is a construction coordinator with IATSE 873. And Peter Bajaj is the president of Dufferin Gate Studios. I'm going to start with you, Peter. I'd like you each to obviously introduce yourself, tell us more about your sustainability journey, how you got started in this space, and what things you look for today in terms of sustainable work.
We come from a different background since we provide spaces to productions that come in here. And one of my biggest challenges in the past 5 years, and 3 years especially, is the amount of waste that goes with this industry. I've come from a different background historically, but I see so much that can be done and improved. So my journey on this has been to see different ways, work with different vendors, try to come up with solutions that keep costs under control. Because productions are at a stage where they can't do too much. They only have so much. And it's to work around things to make things easier for them. And that's been part of my journey.
Marian?
I'm a production designer, as Marwa said, and I actually started my career not in this building, but with CBC, so within this organization. And just going back, and this is going to be brief, but when I started, the whole idea of circularity and sustainable material reuse was actually the template. And in fact, about 10 or 15 years ago, about 3 floors down from here, that template was transferred over to this building, and this 2 floors down was full of scenery to be reused and repurposed over and over again. And I'll just sort of segue this back to the calculator. It's like the calculator can also help in that way, because if you get to reuse things, then you can say, oh, well, that's actually not stuff that is being is having as big a carbon footprint. Anyway, and then so I started off with the sustainability model, which I didn't even know that's what it was. I just thought this is the way the system works. And then as I went on, I became aware that there's a lot of waste, like paper waste, and I became a bit of a paper advocate, and this is before computers and before paper recycling was common. And then I segued into a production designer, and I call myself a thrift shop production designer because I just automatically started using found objects just so I could get a big look for less money. And then about 5-6 years ago, it all just coalesced, and I realized, no, these are all things I've observed in my career, and it's sustainability, and it's actually not brain science. It is brain science. It's not rocket science, but it's actually really quite easy and achievable. So that's kind of where I've landed today, trying to push that.
Peter? Sorry, Joe, my fault.
It's okay. Yeah, let's face it. So I'm a construction coordinator, and I think everything we've been talking about today, every infraction and violation to the earth, it culminates with my department. We chop down trees to put sets up, and then it ends up in the bin 2 weeks later. So, like Marian, I became aware. I did a calculation on one show. Through Marian has always inspired me, and we were talking on this subject, and I did a quick calculation of how much. I figured out I sent 150 metric tons of garbage to landfill during that series. And then you look on the IA website, and there was 39 shows going on that summer. So I'm thinking, oh my God, this is like, what's not sustainable? We can't keep doing this. So that's what really sparked me, and so I've been on a path. There's far more to go, but I've made a lot of headway, and I've had a lot of influence, I think, now of reusing sets on a small. I mean, I think the ideal situation is to have an exit for everything that we bring in, but that's also not realistic on a lot of series right now with time they're given. But for me, I find a great headway if I can use that set at least 5-6 times, and I've been making great headway on that so far.
Thank you, Joe. I also want to thank you for your contribution to the calculator. You developed the initial list that we were able to use for the materials, so I appreciate your input. Marian, let's start with a question. How do you see sustainable practices in the art department in particular? What are they? How do you describe them?
Well, it's sort of two-part. I don't see enough of it, to be honest. But the way I see it moving forward, and the way I think it's something that's very achievable, is first of all, plan first. Like plan, as Joe implied, and it's been mentioned numerous times, different ways today. Plan your exit before you actually start doing anything. So, like, spend that time to imagine, like, are you going to be able to reuse sets from some other source? Are you able to use good materials, like, the most sustainable materials? Whatever your action plan is, put it in place right at the start, and that means talking with your construction coordinator, my art department team, producer, the director, everyone. So I think that's the first thing, is how to be sustainable. And then there's obviously methodologies that one can employ, which in fact are actually more common than one might think. It isn't like the shift from hand drawing to digital. In fact, it's way easier than that. And certainly on series, like as you implied, is but also on feature films, you build modularly, and you build so that it can come apart and go back into the cycle. Kind of what I implied was downstairs, 2 floors down, back in the early days of CBC. And I think that's very important to sort of plan first, design modularly, design for deconstruction, and what that exit's going to be, where those materials are going to go, and with the main goal being so that they do not go to landfill, into waste. So designing modularly, building modularly, using certain methodology, which you might won't like this, Joe, but use as many screws as possible as opposed to the pneumatic nail gun or glue. Like try to use some different methodologies in assembling your sets. Use sustainable suppliers and materials, and there's many out there that keep changing, but there's many excellent green suppliers out there, and so you have to kind of do a little digging in that and sourcing, so that and also encourage your suppliers, if you have regular ones that you're loyal to, encourage them to be sustainable and bring in sustainable versions of their product if they don't already. Educate yourself, which anyone who's here today is already doing. Share information is really important, and most of this stuff is already out there. Like all the information that we've seen today on all the different websites and messages, that there's already so much information, a lot of it parallel, and just share it. Don't keep it to yourself. Like, just really share and educate each other a lot. So I think those are some of the main things. I mean, sure, EV cars for short runs, you can do that too. Use methodologies like scriptation as opposed to printing if you can, though that brings up another question which needs to be addressed, is digital and virtual methodologies, like what is the impact of those? So those are some of the tactics that I've been employing, and I've employed them on a couple of shows I've done, which if there's time I'll show a few slides of a production I did where we were actually quite successful in adopting some of these strategies. So yeah.
Peter, can you tell us a little bit about how you integrate these principles in your work at Dufferin Gate?
Yeah, I mean, that's what Marian was just saying. We're not part of several committees, and we spend a lot of time thinking of different ways to do this. So we've, on our side, launched one of the largest fold and hold and storage initiatives in the province. Now, one of the big things is, how do you stop things going to the dump? Very simple. There's 2 types of shows. One, they'll come back again and again. So, they need storage for 3 to 6 months. Either they stay in the studios or they go store. So we've now launched a program at the lowest cost, almost at our cost, where we've developed an area where we have about storage space for 2,000 trailers to be stored. We've also created a space where, instead of dismantling all of these, maybe we can put whole sets in a place. So we've got another 200,000 square feet allocated for temperature controlled storage. But not just that, our initiative is that's just the tip of the iceberg, because there's several other things we've talked about. One of them is creating a space where some of these sets are used again and again. A hospital set, a courthouse, a school. I mean, you can shoot from different angles, but you certainly can use them again and again. The other initiative is shows that are just done once. And that's where the biggest waste comes into play, because you do it, you go straight goes to dump. So one of the things we've been talking about is how do we convince other studios in LA and others to either sell us a set or give us a set. We'll put them in trailers and containers, and store them with the drawings so that somebody else can come and take that initiative and use those and recycle them. So there's a number of things we're doing. One of the big things we're right now in the process of doing is early. Talk to production as soon as they come in, because we're the first, we're the doorkeepers, because we know about shows before anybody else knows when they, because space is the first thing they book. So once they do, and those same decision makers make these decisions. So what we want to say is, this is what we can do, this is what we want to do. And by the way, we also have teamed up with a number of construction companies where if they were going to go throw the wood, we bring them in early enough saying, hey, how much of this can you take? And initiatives like that so that we can recycle, if not everything, almost everything. And that's some of the things we've taken on ourselves just to make sure we do, because we have to change. Something has to change in the way we do things. So.
I agree. Joe, we talk often about jobs and job descriptions and training. When we shift the conversation towards sustainability, how do we look at these jobs evolving? Certain jobs in the industry, at least, how will they evolve with the sustainability trajectory?
Well, I think it would be beneficial to have a good, at the beginning of a show, someone that's good at a good buyer that was able to identify some of these products and help bring them in. So that would be one thing that's very helpful. But I think also what you're asking is there going to be a shift in employment? And I don't think there is. My instinct said no. But just a very quick example, the show I'm working on right now, it's we shoot every 9 days an episode. There's no continuous narrative between episodes. So every episode, it's a whole different story. So they approached me at the beginning of the show. Because of that, they figured a lot of locations. They thought of that 9 days, they said, we'll probably only be in the studio 2 days and 7 days out. But once we showed them that we could build reuse sets and turn them over quickly because we've got the structure there already, we modulate, we move a few pieces, we're now doing 4, 5, and 6 days in the studio. And that saves, so our pattern budget for us was made assuming that we were just going to be dealing with locations. So my pattern budget has gone up, but I can tell you every other department has saved money because of we're now controlled situation in the studio, and I've been able to employ many more carpenters than I thought I would at the beginning of the show. So I think this showing that I think it's there's a lot of opportunity there.
You brought up a good point about reusage. How is your workflow made easier when you're implementing reusage on a set?
Well, just again, a quick example. I don't know if I can give too much information away on the show, but we've got like 2 apartments, a low-end apartment and a high-end apartment. We've got a space that we kind of call like a precinct holding cell, and we've used that from everything from, like I say, a jail to a police precinct to actually a high school locker room to just changing that around. So we're not building the walls. We can turn those around in a few days by moving a few paces, a bit different paint job, taking some windows from another set and moving them over there. So we were still building some new pieces, don't get me wrong, but it's cut way down by that. So our turnover can be a lot more efficient. In fact, on a series, the last 2 episodes have been busy and we're into overtime now, but for a series to say we've hardly worked any weekends, that's actually significant.
Great. I'm going to ask a question, and whoever would like to answer is more than welcome to. What are the current sustainability incentives that stimulate supply and demand? Which ones can we look into maybe pushing for in the future? Marian, you look like you want to answer this question.
Well, I mean, right now, it's sort of been self-generated incentive, like want to do better, want to be less wasteful. I think the capital I incentive is some kind of, whether it's a tax credit or a government thing, and there's people in the audience here who, are more knowledgeable about that, and I know it's a long, convoluted pathway to have those things put in place, but I feel that that's kind of what is needed, is some kind of incentives that, whether it's the award, sure, you could do the award, but I think it's really where there's some money, a benefit, not a penalty, but a benefit to be sustainable. And the carbon calculators are great, but is the reward for the end, what is the reward at the end of if you come in with a good score on your calculator. So at the moment, I have to say, in my experience, the incentive has been kind of self or department generated and just wanting to do better. Yeah, so, but hopefully in the not too distant future, there'll be something bigger that producers and studio owners and stuff can sort of think this is really helpful.
Thank you. We are talking a lot about developing a sustainable lockup. What are the challenges and opportunities that are fostered by this idea, Peter?
Cost of real estate, very simple. I mean, the reason why we're not doing any of this is real estate. The cost of real estate in this country, if not this city, has tripled over the past 2-3 years. You can see that in your rent. But it's the same things happen in the commercial side. So sustaining those spaces so that we could either reuse or recycle or have others come and use those has become more and more difficult. And that's one of the initiatives for the past 2-3 years we've seen is every time we take it, that becomes a hindrance for a lot of production. So that's where we come up with initiatives and spaces where we can still do that at the levels that the industry can sustain. Remember, things have changed. I mean, ever since the strike and everything else, like we were in LA, everybody's looking to do the same production at 20 to 30% less. So the pressure from LA is very different than what we're talking about here. And the cost structures for every one of us here have at least gone up 10%. So the whole goalposts have changed over the past few years. So the biggest is that. Second is awareness. The third is, again, everyone in this industry only thinks about it, cannot do it at the end. This has to be planned from the beginning. And if people can plan it early enough, then they know that that's the process. Right now, when we go at the end sometimes asking, they're already over budget, there's no time, there's no nothing. That's one of the things we've taken initiatives with a lot of other productions saying, by the way, if you want to lease some of this stuff for 2-3 weeks, because typically they have to leave a certain day from our studios, leave it. It's okay. You don't have to pay us anything. It's those things that have hindered development of this, or at least opportunities to do more. I think that's the biggest.
I'd like to just jump in here too, because in terms of the challenges, real estate, that always has consistently come up as the price of real estate. To that, I'll sort of think, geez, like there's empty office buildings and malls and schools and condo buildings. Anyway, so I just feel, is that a solution? But the benefits are huge. And going to the cost thing that you mentioned, if there was a sustainable lockup, where there is, whether it's actually a full set, the way you described in trailers, and it's like, here, you can rent this whole set, that puts productions that couldn't afford to build a set from scratch into the running for that, right? Because they don't have the crew and the material budgets and stuff to do it from scratch. So, but like, of course, the obvious thing is you're reusing something, and that's the biggest benefit. And whether, again, it's a full set that exists and someone like Peter has the drawings for it and you rented it and hire a crew to put it up, or whether it's actually a storage of flats and windows and doors and platforms, material reuse. That's a very valuable thing. And again, kind of going back to the CBC model, the circular design build thing. It's like you don't throw anything out, it just constantly goes through the flow of use and reuse. So that's, to me, that's the biggest benefit. And there has to be not just an environmental benefit to that, but a financial one, because you're not building things from scratch, right? So,
how do you integrate something like that into a budget? Maybe, Joe, you can tell us, when you're building a set, how do you integrate sustainable measures into a budget?
Well, I think it depends on conversation with the designer, like how are we going to use this again? So that's so it's hard to answer right away, because you still got to put that money up front, but where you can show them, you'll save that money all the way down the line. That's really the core of that conversation, and that's where I come in. I just guess, it's my guesstimate, like what I'm going to save, right?
I'm just going to, sorry, were you going to say something? Just going back to the material calculator, or something like the material calculator, it also enters into the equation, and we're not there yet, but like, again, let's say you have two options, blank piece of paper, start from scratch, bring in the skids of plywood, the team of guys build it, or go to someone like Peter Bajaj, or a warehouse where there's flats and stuff, and okay, these are our ingredients, or this is the set, designer, okay, I want to design the set I want to design. So if there's a bunch of flats I can rent, I'll design it kind of however I want. There might be some key pieces I can rent that'll kind of inspire me, going back to my renting or buying architectural found items to help inspire a nice set for less money, or something along that line. So all of this becomes part of the same conversation, really. And so going back to the blank piece of paper and the skids of plywood and the team building from scratch to the set that already exists, how can I modify that? And that's where if sets are designed and built modularly, and even if they're stored and it's the kitchen set from Joe Blow and Company or whatever, you can reinvent it and turn it into something that you need for your story. So I just think it's just it's not even a question of which is better. It just seems one just seems more obvious to me anyway.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question, then we'll move on to the Q&A. So, and I'll let, again, whoever would like to answer it, but how do we shift this conversation or evolve it in a way where it can bring in other key players in the industry? Because for a lot of these conversations, it stays strictly within the film and television world, but how do we actually expand it in a way that other key players can play a part in moving the dial forward when it comes to sustainable work?
Well, I think we need buy-in right from the top, for one thing. I think prep times are getting shorter and shorter, and so I think if we had a little bit of buy-in from the top that we really want to go this route, that would help. That's one thing.
Yes, I agree, and also, even though this isn't exactly answering your question, like education and encouraging new generations of people, encouraging them in the methodology that they can learn. And I'll just sort of put a little plug in here for a certain kind of workshop that Joe and I and Rose Legace from over at CPD there, we're trying to instigate as a circular design build workshop, which will help guide new workers in the industry into the methodologies where they can design and build modularly and end up with some standing sets and stuff like that. So I think it's, whether it's that model or whether it's just something so that you encourage younger people. I know there's a bunch of students here, I guess you're from Humber, just so that you understand that there's different ways to do things, and it isn't, again, it isn't rocket science, but it's achievable. So.
And like what everybody's saying, and I think I want to reiterate that, I think we need to be leaders in this. We've got to come up with ways that we can present to even LA. I mean, 70% of productions that we do in a large scale are from LA here, is to educate them that we have these resources to make those things happen here. And I think that's part of the effort, is that buy-in has to be there from top down. And once that's there, everybody will follow. It's just that we're used to doing certain things certain way, and we just don't have time to reinvent the wheel, so we just keep doing them the same way. So I think that's the core, is education. But before we do that, we have to become leaders by having institutions like yours that change that map. So.
Great. We're going to move on to the Q&A now. So if you have any questions, is there a mic down here? Nadia, I can just give mine if you'd like. Thank you. So if you have any questions, just put your hand up, and you can let us know which one of the panelists can answer you. So.
Well, my question here is, what kind of sustainable materials do you use to build sets? We talked earlier in a presentation about different materials. For example, in Mexico, there's some companies that do build houses out of milk cartons and recycled clothing, but it's not mainly because of sustainability, but because of lack of resources. So I was wondering if, in terms of set building, do you use some kind of these sustainable as well, materials?
Well, it's funny, as wealthy as Ontario is in many ways, we are lacking in availability to a lot of recycling. And that's maybe because we just take certain things for granted. But there's woods, there are woods that, like using finger joint, because they will make those longer pieces of pine out of small pieces, you know, and put them together. I don't call it what's that? Yeah, no, but there is companies out west doing that, and he'll even take wood that has fasteners and get rid of the fasteners and do that. So that's it. There are some products made from like 90% recycled. I'll use those when I can. I have to say a lot of those won't take a lot of water. And when we do a lot of aging, you know, we've had some problems. We will buy certain things trying to think the right way, but it ends up causing us a bit of trouble when you start to run water and age things if you're looking really aging a set. So we're constantly looking, I can tell you that. And a lot of the structural stuff now I can get recycled. And some of the surfaces that I'm working on, I can get FSC at least, you know, but I'm open for ideas on that, okay?
Yeah, further to that, it's kind of going back to the benefit of reusing materials. It's like those are more sustainable than new materials. And but I think you were talking about Think Lightweight. Were you kind of referring? Yeah. So there's a company, just as a local example, in Tilsonburg, which is I don't know. Anyway, it's a city about 2 hours from here. Anyway, they make paper products. They make thick, thin sheets of it. Everything's paper, and I've used their panels, ThinTac, I think it's called, and that particular product, I've used it for ceiling panels, just as an example, but you can use it for signage. Yeah, you can paint it, but it probably wouldn't take a huge amount of plaster work, for example, on top of it, but you can certainly use it for many uses, as opposed to using plastic Sintra or some kind of other kind of plastic-based backing. And that particular product that I'm mentioning is 98% recycled paper, just the product itself. So not only is it recyclable and more sustainable, but that product, as an example, in itself is 98% recycled paper. So you have to do a bit of research, and I don't know, about 5 years ago, one of my colleagues who's here today, Asta Burke, and I kind of created a sustainable suppliers, green suppliers list focused on the art department needs just for Ontario. Nobody's had time to kind of keep it up, so some of them are probably not existent anymore, but it's still, they're out there. There are suppliers out there, and you just have to ask your suppliers or do your own research too. So there are some, but you have to do some digging.
Thank you. Melanie.
Hey, I just had a quick question. You know, I have a lot of conversations with folks in different jurisdictions that are experimenting with materials, and they're also experimenting with different kinds of paints. Are you seeing anybody play around with like different marbling techniques? You know, if we're not working with oil, we're working with water-based pieces. Is there anything like that happening here in Toronto? Is that something that we're starting to experiment here yet with those techniques, or is that just something we want to put on the list of things to do?
They haven't been using oil-based paints in film for years, have they?
No, I wouldn't say for years. There's probably still the odd product around, but no, on the whole, it's been that's made great headway, and using like low solvent or no solvent, right, and water-based paint, and the Scenics and Lisa and IATSE have also gotten really good at sharing as the show's going down. They'll pass those paints on, and so before it used to be a big deal, you know, trying to pass them on, but now they just get passed on to the next show, you know.
And there are companies,
so it's very good.
and there are some paint companies that actually, that's what they do, is they recycle paint. They, like there's Loop, and there's Laurentide, has another brand name out of Quebec. There's a big company, I'm blanking on the name, in Calgary, but these are mostly industrial-sized paint companies that, you know, do warehouses and stuff. But when they have leftover batches of, like, you know, beige number 22 or something, they'll repackage it into smaller things. So there's a lot of recycled paint actually out there available now, and certainly low VOC, which is also good because it's more environmental. But personally, I try to go after the recycle because it's less expensive and it's already been out there and we get to reuse it.
I think we have time for one more question. I see a hand.
Hi, I just have a question in regards to structures. I think both Joe and Peter talked about this earlier about trying to get the studios to agree to have their structures reused or repurposed. I am currently finding that a bit difficult because they don't want their structures or their builds to be recognized on other productions. So I was wondering what your experiences were when it comes to donating structures from sets that have wrapped.
I can say it is a bit mixed. There are some studios that are 100% behind that and will help you even look at the end if to try and pass things on. Some are more protective, and I tell you, it's. I used to think that you couldn't even reuse iconic pieces. You had to maybe just pass on the doors, the flat. But I'm now convinced that working with certain designers that it showed me that you can use iconic pieces, even the very next episode, and people aren't going to notice. So studios have to get over that, and some that I think it might have to do with the sustainability officers they have. I'm not sure, but some are very open to that, and others not so open.
Yeah, and like I mentioned earlier, that's something that needs an education in LA. Because yes, they're the IP for them is a very, very big thing, and half the time, or if not more than that, that's what stops, because there's 4 layers have to sign off on those type of things in LA before, or here. But the thing is that education's needed because those things don't necessarily have to be used the same way. You can take those IPs, still save all of these things.
Sorry, I just wanted to also add that these pieces can also be used for theater productions. It doesn't always have to be film, because a lot of students work on both film and theater, and that's, it's the same idea,
absolutely.
the same build.
That's exactly what we're trying to save and come up with an ecosystem where, like Marian said, it's available and you can go see these things.
Just on that note, we haven't really mentioned it in this panel, but yes, the donating at the end of a show, donating it to theater groups or film classes, whatever, is definitely on the radar. And I think just one thing I have to add to that is I think when you give free stuff away, you have to hand the responsibility to that person to then deal with it responsibly after they're finished with it. So I think we have to be mindful of that when we give free stuff, that we just have to pass that message along. It's now your responsibility.
Yep. Marian used to call me Robin Hood because I was always passing things on to people doing the fringe theater or low budget productions. So yeah.
Thank you all very much. This has been a very insightful conversation, and thank you all for participating.